All right. Now we are starting. Ladies and gentlemen, good day, good day, good day, everyone. I hope you are fine. We meet again here at Lusatech Training Academy, Fried Campus. And our hope today is we are meeting because of Section 8. Section 8 of Occupational Health and Safety is the one that is forcing us today to meet and talk about the risk assessment. Because one thing that we continuously talk about when we are referring to occupational health and safety is that there should be ways where people are able to communicate hazards to the employees and everyone in general. There should be ways where people are able to communicate your risks as well as the controls of these risks, how they are being controlled. So we are going to try by all means to discuss a lot of things about hazard identification and risk assessment. One thing that I know pretty much well is that we are already, we have already pushed our assignments. I've checked assignment number 1, a lot of people are doing well. I've checked assignment number 2, a lot of people are also doing well there. Today, of course, assignment number 3 is going to be opening at 3 o'clock. So, ladies and gentlemen, find ways to go and do that. All right, now let's get into today's issue where we are going to be talking about this thing there where you guys say that HIRA, where we say it's HIRA. A lot of people like to call it HIRA, which is hazards identification and risk assessment. Hazards identification and risk assessment. First and foremost, if you check in section 8, if you check section 13, which says duty to inform, you also check section 18, which talks about the functions. It talks about the functions of a HIRA, right? So as a HIRA, you are supposed to also be involved in doing risk assessment, right? But if you go back to section 8 tells you that risk assessment must be done by a competent person. So that is why then when we are training SHIREPs, we also do involve hazard identification and risk assessment as part and parcel of learning SHIREP, because the law or the act is saying those who are involved in SHIREP, they also need to be competent on it. So without further ado, then let's get into the aims of this lesson. Let's get into the aims of this lesson. What exactly do we want to achieve? We would want to achieve a point where each one of us is able to describe the need for a risk assessment. Why do we need to perform risk assessment? We would also want to be able to describe the legal requirements regarding risk assessment at work. We would also want to be in a position where we can identify hazards. We should also be in a position where we are able to apply some of the risk assessment models that we have. And finally, we would want to talk about recommendations that one needs to put in so that we know that risk has been eliminated. If not eliminated, it has been mitigated. If not mitigated, then it is controlled. So that's basically what this whole thing is all about. So hopefully, people will bear with us as we zoom into this today's our today's lesson here. All right, let's get into a few definitions that we might wanna clear off before we move on. Right, we do have hazards, right? So at some point you would want to define what a hazard is, because from day one, like Monday until today, we have been talking about hazard. What is a hazard, right? So a hazard becomes any source or exposure any source of or exposure of what? Danger. If there's anything that can expose you to danger, then that particular thing is then regarded as a hazard, right? Danger, of course, then it means there is a result of you being injured or something being damaged, or you fall ill, or even death. So when we are talking about a hazard, we are referring to anything or any act that might result in somebody being exposed to danger. But understand that a hazard does not mean that danger is already there, because some of hazards, they are there sitting as hazards, but they do not pose danger as yet, right? We are going to look into these things using examples that are quite common in life, right? We are going to use examples that are common in life for us to understand or try to dissect the idea of hazards there. Before going there, then let's move on to the next part where we talk about these definitions and look into where you are right now. We are talking about risk now, right? What is it that we then say is risk, right? Because now when we're referring to a hazard, right, a hazard will pose a particular risk for you to actually be injured, or for you to actually be or for damage to take place. So in this situation now, we are saying that there is hazard, there is risk. These two things are not the same. However, they are always working together at some point, or something like that, right? Other definitions we need to talk about is, when can we say people are safe? People are safe when there is no hazard, when people are free of hazard, or in other words, when the hazard that are there are being controlled, because sometimes hazards might not be removed totally or eliminated totally, but when you realize that a hazard can't be eliminated, you can control it. And we're going to talk about that before the end of the lesson, right? Of course, if a person is then said to be healthy, I think we have spoken about it at the beginning. How do we then say a person is healthy and stuff like that? Okay, let's then look into where you are right now. I would want us to actually look at where you are right now. Each one of you, as we are busy learning or talking right now, you are maybe at work, some they are at home, some they are in internet cafe, wherever you are. I would want you to look around where you are sitting right now, look around where you are right now, and be able to pinpoint or to identify hazards that are close to you right now. Because there is no way that where you are sitting, there is no hazard. That would be very unusual. That would be very, very unusual, right? So hazards, are actually found almost anywhere they are hazard, right? For instance, I can just give an example of the phone that you are using right now, right? A person is using phone. Some of you, actually, most of you are watching me through the phones. That phone you are using right now is a hazard, right? It is a hazard. Why is that phone a hazard? Because it may actually have a potential to harm you, or to cause harm, or to cause danger to you, right? But let's now go and look into the risk part, right? The risk part now will tell you that some of these hazards we are going to identify today, they don't actually have risk, or they are not posing risk at all, or at that particular time, right? Let me make my argument more clear by using an example of a knife, right? We all know a knife, right? A knife. People use a knife for a lot of reasons. Basically, a knife, it's a utensil that is used for cutting, isn't it? So you are able to cut things when you use a knife. A knife is also used to stab people or can actually stab people. I can take a knife right now and stab somebody, and that somebody might die or sustain injuries. So a knife now, if we look at it, we can see that a knife is actually a hazard. Remember? So wherever you are at home, you are at work, you are in the street, you are in a restaurant, you are whatsoever, you are going to find knives being used or being handled by people. At that particular moment, they might not pose risk to you, but deep down, a knife is a hazard because it has got potential to harm you. Okay? Now, let me also give an example. I'll come back to the example of a knife. Let me use an example of your mother's or your granny's shoes, right? The shoes at home there that your granny used or used if they are not no longer with us. Usually, mothers or grannies they have got shoes, slippers, or you can call them flip flops or whatever they are. They wear them at home there, right? These are shoes. You might not see them as a hazard at all, right? But try something funny in front of them. Do something wrong in front of your mother or your granny. That shoe will change same time and become a hazard. They will moor you with it. They will pick it up and throw it on your face, or even hold you and beat you up with the same shoe. So at this particular moment, we can easily say the shoe is a hazard. It is a hazard. But at that particular moment, when it was still on her feet, it was not a hazard because it did not carry the risk. So it's a hazard which is not carrying a risk. But by the time she becomes angry, the shoe is then converted to become what? A weapon to beat you up. Then it means it's now a hazard that is carrying risk. Right? Let me go back to that example of a knife. You are sitting in a restaurant, you are having fun with your partner, right? You are eating dinner. You don't have a problem. You guys are having fun. Obviously, at that restaurant, they're going to give you knives and forks for you to eat, fork and knife, right? You are eating, you are eating, you are eating. It means that these knives, these forks on your table, they are actually hazards, right? But at this particular moment, they are posing no risk unto your lives because no one is angry, right? But the moment maybe one of you is cheating or a cell phone rings and some kind of a name is seen on that phone, the knives and the forks, they change immediately and they start to become what? Hazard. Because I might start chasing you with a knife in that restaurant now. So with these examples, we are going towards a point. What I would want to explain here is that almost anything is a hazard, but you need to actually first and foremost analyze it first so that you can purely or surely know whether at this particular moment this hazard is causing risk or no risk, right? So it is a very important element for us to learn as we are moving with our today's discussion. It is very important for us to have that analogy. Let me also go back to the restaurant example. Let me go back to a restaurant example again, and then talk about the food that is in front of us. Hey, some of you are going to be hungry because I'm using examples of food now, right? If I'm to use the example of food in front of us, this food is good for us. We are enjoying it. We are eating it. There's nothing wrong with this food, right? But the moment that food start giving you heartburn, right? When that food starts giving you heartburn, now you are unable to enjoy it. You are now unable to continue with it. Then the food has just changed to become a hazard that is now giving you risk. Or let's say you are trying to hide that when you eat a lot, then you are waiting for your boyfriend to look aside, then you throw meat inside the mouth and chew fast. Then it comes and blocks you here on the neck or on your windpipe here. Now, food has changed to become a weapon that is choking you. What? So at the end of the day, my good people, I will go back to industries. Right now, I'm still talking about just a normal life that we live when we go to restaurants or when we eat at our homes. Life as we survive, can everything that is next to us can change to become a hazard. Hence, it's very important as a HIRA to understand that part, because at your workplace or wherever you are going to be employed or where you are employed right now, if you look around, almost everything can be a hazard. However, that thing might not be posing a risk at that particular moment, but at a later stage, it might pose a risk. For example, use of a shovel when you are in a construction industry. Use of a shovel, if you are going to take a shovel, use it to mix everything that you are eating. What must they say there? Okay, now you mix your mortar with that shovel and stuff. There is nothing wrong about it, right? There is nothing wrong about it. You might use a shovel nicely and never be hurt for the rest of your life, right? But if I am your assistant and you are a builder on top of what do you call it, a scaffold, and I have given you a shovel, that shovel is now on top of my head. Anytime it might fall and hit me on, and I might sustain injuries. So generally, we will then realize almost anything is a hazard in life, right? However, it is important for us then, after identifying a hazard, to move on to the next stage that we need to talk about. Okay. All right. Now, having spoken about these hazards, let's move on to the idea of assessment. At every point, we have got three types of assessment that we should be able to conduct, right? At every point, we need to be able to reach a point where we are able to conduct risk assessment, because this process I'm talking about is called risk assessment. We do have, number one, a risk assessment that is called baseline risk assessment, right? So when people ask you, name three types of risk assessment, you are going to tell them, number one, baseline. Number two, issue-based risk assessment. Number three, you are going to say what? A continuous risk assessment. Let me take them one by one. Let me take them one by one and see. Let me also try to present a window where we are maybe going to see that, because I might not be sure if my window is going to be showing me what I'm talking about here, the types of risk assessment. But it doesn't matter. Let's discuss first. I will be able to come back to this window at a later stage. Now, what I was saying here is that we have got three types of risk assessment, right? We will talk about the first one, baseline risk assessment. So baseline means that you are going to take everything at your work site. You are going to check everything. You are going to assess everything. You are going to inspect everything, corner to corner. You get me there? It means you're going to go to the west side, east side, south side, north side, everywhere at the site where you are doing risk assessment. In other words, for you to remember properly, let's just say baseline risk assessment is like when you are doing spring cleaning, when you say you are doing spring cleaning at home, you are going to take everything down, check everything, wash everything, clean everything. Unlike every day when you just clean around certain areas. So when you are doing baseline risk assessment, it basically means that you are taking everything into consideration. So at companies, when we do a baseline risk assessment, usually it's a situation where maybe it's at the beginning of the year or at the beginning of a certain period. We want to know throughout the year, are we going to be happy? Are we going to be fine, or how? Right? Or we can also do a baseline risk assessment when we are opening a site. And we are opening a site, so we want to start by doing a baseline risk assessment. So to wind up on the issue of baseline risk assessment, I'm saying with baseline risk assessment, it means that everything is being checked, right? You are checking everything from A to Z, from the gate up to the fence, from the beginning to the end. So everything is taken care of there. All right. We're now going to the second type of a risk assessment. We call it issue-based. It's based on an issue. That is why it's called issue-based. Because it is based on an issue, right? I can see some of you are trying to write down things. It's good to write down things. It's nice. It shows that people are really listening there. Of course, the textbook issue I will share with it at the end of the presentation where you're gonna find this information. Not a problem. Now, the issue-based risk assessment means specifically that you are going to be doing an assessment based on a particular issue. That is why the way the name is saying what? Issue-based. You are doing an assessment based on a particular issue. It might be that you are doing so because there's a new machinery at work, right? Let's say there's new machinery at work. So if you are going to be buying new machine, you want to do risk assessment for that particular machine before it starts working or before it arrives. Like here at Lusatec, if they say they want to buy a new photocopying machine, right? We might want to sit down and do a risk assessment for the photocopying machine so that we know what are the risks associated with this machine. What are the hazards associated with this machine, right? Or you might be at a construction site or a mining site and you decide that, look, let's go and buy a diesel tank so that we don't have to be going to the filling station and get a diesel every now and then. So you install a big tank for diesel. In this situation, it basically means that you should do based on what? On that particular item that is being purchased. Okay. Another situation that might force people to do issue-based assessment is when there is an incident, right? So actually, when we are doing incident investigation, in other words, we are doing issue-based assessment. All right. When you are doing issue-based assessment, when there has been an incident, you would want to find out why the incident take place and stuff like that. So in that particular situation, you are also doing what? An issue-based risk assessment. Okay, let's move on to the third one. The third one is continuous assessment. Continuous assessment, the word is clear. This is continuous, and it non-stop. So with continuous risk assessment, it basically means that you continuously do this risk assessment. You continuously conduct risk assessment. I'll give you an example here. If you are working in a butcher and you are that person who cuts meat, cutting meat, right? You cannot be somebody who believes that your machine is still okay. You need to continuously check it, continuously assess it, because anything can happen to that machine if you don't do so. Or another example I can give, people in the construction industry. If you are actually dealing with scaffolds, and so if you are going to be dealing with scaffolds, you cannot then just relax and say this scaffold was okay before lunch, it's still okay right now. This scaffold was okay when I went up, now that I'm going down, it's still okay. No, these are high risk situations, therefore they need you to continuously assess. So you need to continuously assess it. Same as people who are working in the mines. People who have been exposed to the mines, they know very well that in a mine, whether you have worked on a particular place already, when you come back, you still have to assess if it's still safe to enter, right? You might have entered yesterday into a mine. The next day, it does not guarantee you that it's still safe for you to enter. Therefore, the risk assessment in a mine situation is a continuous risk assessment. They can't do only an issue based alone. They need to do it continuously so that this thing can be done. So, ladies and gentlemen, you can actually see now the picture of what risk assessment is all about. Let's get into a point where we then talk about particular steps, which actually are taken when somebody is conducting a risk assessment, right? There are steps which should be followed, or there are stages that need to be followed, right? Let's look at the first stage. The first stage is when you actually identify a hazard, right? The first stage is when you identify a hazard. You would want to identify a hazard. I am going to project what is on your LMS there so that we can just use that instead of using just where is it? Oh, it's here. There you are. Right. So I'm going to project a window on your LMS that talks about the stages when we are dealing with risk assessment, right? So when we are there, you will see that there are particular stages that one needs to do that, right? First step here, you would want to identify. First step is that you want to identify a hazard, right? So the stages are what? Identify hazard first. Then the second step is you would want to assess the exposure. You would want to assess the exposure, right? And then the third step would be that you want to evaluate the risk. You would want to evaluate the risk. Then the fourth step becomes where you would want to control the risk. And then the fifth stage is to monitor and review. You monitor and review, right? So let's just go through those steps again, good people, so that we can remember them as we move on. And when you go to the LMS, you will find it. But for those who are not seeing my LMS right now, such as those who are on TikTok or who are on other social media, as this is being done live on it. All right, we are saying that the risk assessment has got stages. There are stages that are involved. Stage number one, you identify hazards. Identify hazard. We have already done that so far, you and I. We have identified hazard where you are sitting there, right? Each one of you can be able to check where you are right now and identify hazard, right? Some of you are in front of food. Some of you are in front of your homes. Some of you are in front of a TV. Some of you are in front of a phone, and so on. You can be able to identify hazard as we do. If we had time, I would ask you to tell me these hazards, but it's fine. That will be an issue of another day, right? Let's then see the next thing, right? The risk assessment stage number 2 is you need to find out to what extent are we exposed to this hazard? to what extent are we exposed to this hazard? All right, I will come back and explain these things one by one. Stage number 3, you would want to evaluate the risk, right? You would want to evaluate the risk, right? Then stage number 4, you would want to find ways of controlling the risk, right? Then stage number 5, it's you now monitoring and reviewing your control methods if they are working. So you need to always understand that you will be following that particular route when it comes to issues about risk assessment and stuff. Let's then take a look at the first part of our risk assessment, where we then said the first part is identifying hazard, right? Identifying hazard. The first part is identifying hazard. Let's look at those parts, good people. Right. When we identify hazard, we can be able to put hazard into different categories, right? According to my notes here, there are categories, different categories of hazard. I have got physical hazard, right? I've got what? Physical hazard. I've got chemical hazard. I've got biological hazard. And I also have what? Economic hazard. I've got a psychosocial hazard. Okay. All right. Not a problem. Let's zoom into one after the other so that we can just understand it clearly there. Wherever you are, good people, we are talking about the categories of hazards you might find at workplace, because we are on step number 1, where we are saying identify hazard. All right. Look at this. You have got physical hazard. Physical hazard basically are those that actually are going to cause injuries on you. You can actually see that there is an injury on a person. You can actually feel that there's an injury on a person, or you can actually see somebody being cut, or being falling ill, or getting damaged, or getting fractures and so on. Let's look at those examples as per my notes here. We have got noise, right? Excessive noise, right? Whether you are working at a factory where there are noise constantly, or you are working with trucks, or you are working at a construction company, or you are working into mines, wherever, where there's a lot of noise. Therefore, noise can be an example of physical hazard. Some, they suffer vibrations, right? Vibrations when you are using vibrating tools for too long, such as a jackhammer or a stamper, right? Some people are going to be exposed to extreme temperatures, where there is too much heat, right? Where there is even sometimes too much coldness, depending on which side are you. You can also suffer things like radiation, especially people who are working with x-rays in hospitals, x-rays in surgeries and stuff, right? Then there is the common ones, the common physical hazards that people usually face almost even at home or elsewhere, is slips, trips, and falls, right? People, they slip because of wet floors. People, they trip because they are not seeing properly, which is poor lighting. Or sometimes people, they trip because of uneven surfaces. Sometimes people fall when these things happen. Right? Let's not waste time and move to the next part of our hazards and talk about chemical hazard. It's clear if we are talking about chemical hazard, because chemical hazard, straight away, we are facing toxic chemicals, we are talking flammable substances, we are talking things that can corrode, corrosion agents such as acid and so on and so on. So when we talk about chemicals, we are saying you are being exposed to chemicals. One of the examples of chemicals that we are exposed to every day, your washing. When you are doing washing, we do washing every now and then. We use detergents such as your Surf, you use Omo, we use different type of washing powders. Right. After washing, what happens to your hands? After washing, what happens to your hands? You can look at your hands and see your hands getting hurt because you have just used something to wash. If you don't quickly apply Vaseline or glycerin or whatever lotion you are using, you can actually start seeing your hands cracking. And so that exposure to chemicals or chemical hazard. So even at our homes, we do have chemical hazards such as the surf, the Omo, the washing powder you are using to wash. Or even when you are at work, we do have people who get exposed to cement, right? People get exposed to glue, right? When you are busy using pipes or you are fixing pipes, you can meet glue, and this glue can actually become a chemical that affects you and so on. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is another category of hazards there. We move on and talk about biological hazard. It's clear, the word clearly indicates here we are talking about something that has got life, which actually can give you problems. Here we are talking about pathogens that you find, such as HIV, right? Hepatitis B, hepatitis C. We are talking about some virus that you can get that can cause flu, right? All of a sudden, you are in a room with people, or you are in a taxi with people, or you are in a bus. When you get home, you are now suffering from flu because you got it from them. It means that you were exposed to biological hazard, right? Or sometimes you drink water that has got some germs inside or certain items inside, such as bacteria, and you start having a running stomach. Oh, you're gonna run to toilet there. Now, in that situation, you have been exposed to biological hazards, good people. Okay, let's move on to D. D is talking about economic hazards. What are economic hazards? This word sounds like economic. It's not. They are not even related. Economic hazard, it's not easy to just explain, but we will definitely try to explain it, right? Economic hazard, they've got a lot to do with what you have done for too long. You hear me there? If you are going to do something for too long, you are bound to suffer certain issues that have got to do with economic hazard. Let me give you an example of a person maybe who is working in a restaurant. A person who is working in a restaurant and you are exposed to heat, right? You are exposed to heat because of you are frying chicken, you are frying this, you are frying that. Unfortunately, there is no stove that is lower than your abdomen, right? There is no stove that is upper than your abdomen. All stoves are actually within the radius of your abdomen, right? Which means that after working for some years in a situation like that, you might start suffering from if you're a woman, you have got womb problems, right? Because you have been exposed to excessive heat around those areas. Or if you're a man, you start suffering from growing problems, right? And then you start having issues and issues and issues. Another example of economic hazard is poor posture for people who work in offices such as admin staff. They might sit on a chair that is not comfortable for too long. You might end up having shoulder problems, neck problems, back problems, right? These things usually don't happen right now. They happen after a very long time. So you might not see them now, you see them later. Hence, they are called economic hazard. So you would need to look into that. Another example of economic hazard are those brothers and sisters who are working long distance driving of trucks, right? People who are driving trucks long distance, they sometimes or at some point start suffering from kidney problems. They start suffering from those problems. And that's an example of an economic hazard that could have exposed them to that. All right, let's then move on to other types of hazard so that we can close off this chapter of hazard. We do have psychosocial hazard, right? where we are talking about workplace violence. We are talking about job stresses. There are people who are stressed, guys. People who have got poor work and life balance. You are unable to balance properly between your life and your work and stuff like that. So you are always stressed. Like us teachers, we are always stressed. Teachers are always stressed, guys. You might as well start donating for us like other celebrities. Yes, they are being donated the most because we are really going through a lot. Imagine trying to convince a number of people to understand HIRA. Why should I convince all of you to understand HIRA at the end of the day? It is a job. Right. Anyway, on a lighter note, good people, people out there, they have got a poor life-work balance. They have got job stresses. People get burned out. People also suffer bullying at work. Bullying is not only at school, bullying, they are there at work, people who bully others. And then you end up suffering psychosocial hazards, right? Sometimes people are also bullied where they are staying in the community. It can also become a problem there and affects your life, okay? Finally, we do have electrical and fire hazard. Of course, the name is clear. These are electrical and fire hazard. People, that's the first stage, is hazard identification. So what I can actually say right now is that most of you, where you are sitting right now, I'm sure you are able to identify a hazard, right? I'm sure you are now able to look around, check aside, and identify a hazard, right? For those who are seeing where I am sitting here, there is a board on top of me here. If I'm getting up, I might actually hit this board. Therefore, this is one of my hazards as I am teaching in front of you people. Let's move on now. Let's move on now and go to the next part where we say now, let's find out the exposure, right? We would want to find out the exposure. To what extent are we exposed to this hazard? You would want to find out to what extent are we exposed to this hazard. Okay, so at this point now, you would want to know who is at risk, right? You are answering such questions, right? Where you are saying, who is at risk? How is this person exposed to this risk? So who can be at risk? I think a day before yesterday, we spoke about traffic that we find at workplace. We have got visitors, we have got employees, we have got contractors, we have got community. We even talk about people's livestock, imbuzi, inkomo and stuff. And then we agreed that these are what do you call that? These are traffics. Yes, these are traffics that might actually need us to take care of. So in this situation now, you would want to ask who is at risk, right? Then you determine how will this risk occur. Is it through inhalation, or are we going to be skin contact, or is this person going to fall and break, and so on. Another thing that you'd want to do when you evaluate risk is to find duration and the frequency. How long will this hazard expose risk to people? And then lastly, you would want to know the severity and the consequences of that particular risk. All right. This will make sense when I project an example. My time is moving, so I'm going to try to move again. Right. So once you have done risk exposure and evaluation thereof, you need to move to control the people. You need to move to control. Right. When we are at a point where you have now identified your risk and stuff, you need to go to control. Let me project a picture that will indicate. Let me project a picture that will indicate what we call hierarchy of controls. Hierarchy of controls, which is how you then use when you have identified risk and you have done all these exposure things, and you want to actually control things. Let me project that so that we can be able to look into it. Right. There is a picture there in front of you which says a hierarchy of risk control. Hierarchy of risk control. I hope it is visible clearly to most of you there. All right. When we are now having identified the, if it's not visible, don't worry, you will meet it when or you will see the clear part when I'm explaining. If it's not visible, don't worry, I will explain. I will definitely explain, good people. Now let's talk about the controls. Most people, when they see a risk or a what do you call this, a hazard, they quickly think that PPE is the answer. People think that PPE is always the answer. It's not always the answer. You need to start from the beginning, right? The beginning, we have got a hierarchy. When we talk about a hierarchy, remember, a hierarchy means something that is stacked, or things that work on stages. Stage number one, you need to find ways of eliminating the hazard. Find ways of eliminating the hazard. If you are talking about a knife, I gave you an example earlier on. If we are talking about a knife at a restaurant as a hazard, so we might actually say, let's take away knives. People must just eat without knives, because that's the first thing you should think about, is to eliminate the hazard. Let's take away the knives, right? So that way, you then sit down with your crew as sheriffs and realize that, we can't take away knives because they are important. So we cannot eliminate the risk. If you can't eliminate the risk, then you move to the next stage. The next stage is substitution. Can't we substitute, right? Can't we change this knife and bring something else, maybe a spoon, right? So you are substituting that particular process or operation or material or anything, so that you can actually end up with not having the hazard. If substitution has failed, then you need to move on to number three, where you do what we call engineering control. Engineering control, now it means you are putting in new processes, reorganizing the work, isolating the problem, so that the risk or the hazard cannot be exposed to your people, right? In this situation, if I'm still using the example of a knife in a restaurant, I would re-engineer the knife. How do I re-engineer it? I can bring a plastic knife, right? I can bring a what? A wood knife, and say, I have re-engineered the process. Now you can use a wood knife or a plastic knife, right? So at this moment, what am I doing? I am not running to PPE. No, I have to take step by step. First, I eliminate. Secondly, I substitute. Thirdly, I re-engineer, or I use engineering controls. Then number four, I should use administrative controls. What is administrative controls? With administrative controls, we're now referring to things that you would do maybe in an office or something like that, right? So what I would do, if I would have a problem with people stabbing each other with knives, I would rather take them to sit down with them and provide counseling and provide what? Training. So even at work, when you are dealing with a hazard, start from elimination, substitution, engineering, then admin issues. Probably you might say, no, let me train people, or let me give people days off, let me change them to work night shift instead of day shift, let me change, and so on. So now admin issues, it basically means you are now doing more admin work. And finally, you can then be able to say, there's nothing that is changing, therefore let us use PPE, right? PPE, personal protective equipment, is only used once you have realized that all other options can't work. Then you use what? PPE, right? I can easily maybe draw a bit of linen from Who is okay, right? A bit of lenience from where when we talk about things such as you remember this time of COVID, right? When there was COVID there, the process that governments were taking at the beginning, they all wanted to eliminate uh, this virus thing, COVID, right? The next thing that they were trying to do is to substitute it, right? And then at some point they started to try to re-engineer processes, how people were working and stuff. At some point they started to introduce administrative controls such as lockdowns, such as curfews, such as prohibiting alcohol, such as only allowing essential workers to go to work. And so at that moment they were now introducing administrative controls, right? However, when they realized that all these controls, if failed, they ended up releasing us and they just told us, you know what, use PPE, right? People were then given opportunity to start wearing masks, wearing shields, sanitizing, and we then went back to work. And people started going to shops. But at the beginning, they were using other controls without emphasizing much on PPEs and stuff, right? So, good people, these are a hierarchy of risk control, which basically means that after you have performed a risk assessment, you would expect to end with a risk control measures. When you have put in these risk control measures, the last stage is for you to continuously monitor and review your control methods. Lastly, before I close off, let me project an example of a risk control sheet or a risk control template that was used at some point during COVID, right? Right. Let me project it. I hope it will be visible. If it's not, you will meet it in your notebooks and stuff there. All right. There it is. I'll place it here and try to make it more broader, right? So as I take it from down, you can see it says risk assessment, and there is this part where it talks about who is the company, assessor signature, what we are not worried about that. It also gives us here a legend that this is unlikely, this is possible, this is likely, right? It also tells us this legend that green means keep monitoring the process, lime, yellow, was this orange, and then red, right? So it tells us that green means very low, lime means low, medium is yellow, and then orange is high and red is very high. So what I can say here is that this type of a document is a risk assessment sheet or a risk assessment template that you can use if you would want to use it. But remember, there is no one size fit all. You can be able to design your own risk assessment template that you would want to use. Now, from this risk assessment template, you can see that there is a column for hazard, who may be at risk, what are the tasks or activities, what are the route of exposures, and what are the health effects. So here you are identifying the risk. You are also assessing the severity, and then you are assessing the frequency. And then when you are done, you go to control measures, right? In this situation, there is a existing control measures, and this person wants to decide whether to proceed with existing control measures or start new ones, or there is need for additional measures and stuff. So at the end of the day, my good people, this is an example or a template of risk assessment document that you can actually utilize or use. Of course, also at the end, you can be able to apply the hierarchy of controls for COVID-19. It's also given. I am going to share this document. I'm going to share this document on our LMS as soon as we go. I'm going to share this what you call this document so that everyone will be able to read through it. Right. Let me just check in some of the messages that you've been sending. Before you go, can I kindly ask something? We'll type the question. Tomorrow I might not be available, hence I want to ask now. Please do so before we go then so that we can do that, okay? There's also a contribution there that the hierarchy at times is not applied accordingly, causes issues in the workplace. This brings a lot of challenges as employers ignore what the safety officer implements. Yes, of course, that's one of the things that actually happens at work. You know that. All right. The final exam or test, does it also have 3 attempts or we have to do it once? Okay, for those who it's a good question there. It's a very good question there. All right. Yes, it has got 3 attempts. Every assessment has got 3 attempts. You attempt the first one. If you happen to fail, you prepare yourself to do the second attempt. If you also fail, you should also do another and final attempt. Right. So there are 3 attempts. I hope you answered. And then the other question say, when are you writing these exams? We are writing the final assessment on Friday. It's only opening at night. It's opening at night. It's opening at night, and you have got 3 attempts, and you have got 24 hours to do the assessment. So as soon as you wake up on Friday until you sleep, you have got a chance to do this assessment. And remember, you have actually for the whole day to attempt, good people. I'm just trying to fix something quick here. Yes, it's fixed. Right. So I did not write even one assignment. It doesn't allow me to enter inside. All right. What you need to do is that you need to contact the number of admin. We all know the number of admin, 078 500 6000. Right. If you go and contact this number, tell them that you have got a problem or you are unable to see A, B, C, D, then they will be able to assist you. How many assessments do we have? You have got 4 assessments, 3 assignment and 1 final test. Right. Do we get certificate? Yes, you will get a valid certificate, but I'll explain the process for you to get an assessment tomorrow. I'll explain the process of you to get the certificate because it is a process, right? So you are going to get certificates, a valid and accredited certificate. Let me repeat, a valid and accredited certificate. And the certificate from Lusatech Training Academy is powerful, ladies and gentlemen. Is powerful. You should check us everywhere where we go or check us on social media. You will see how powerful we are. Of course, I'm selling it. Right. So, okay, cool. On that note, on assignment 2, on question 8 and 9, it was the same question but had different questions. Well, you need to understand that these questions are not actually created by us. They are created by they are generated by the system. I don't know how I can explain this, but they are generated by the system. For example, right now you are saying question 8 and 9. For somebody, it was question 4 and 5. For somebody, it was question 3 and 6. So the system changes these questions as you attempt them. So it will be a little bit difficult for me to know why and how, but I will check. Right. Does the time duration or does it expire? Yes, certificates in the OHS are still expiring, people. We are still waiting for instruction from QCTO to issue certificates that don't expire. As of now, they are still expiring. That's the problem. It's a 3-year period. After 3 years, you need to review them. I would explain why certificates in OHS expire. They expire because there are changes that happens almost every now and then. So when you go back to renew your certificate, you are then trained again. Right. Can I allow a situation whereby we stop today? For